Just about the only good thing to come out of this year's reboot of The Crow was that it led to me going back and watching the 1994 original. The Crow is a darkly poetic story of revenge, life and death, and ultimately love. The kind of love that not even death can end. Based on the comic book series of the same name, created by James O'Barr and first released in 1989, The Crow is the deliciously gothic tale of a young rocker whose life was cut short alongside his fiancée's. A crow who's tasked with ferrying souls to the afterlife is able to resurrect those who died under horrific circumstances, and thus, that rocker, Eric Draven, is risen from the dead to set things right. Imbued with supernatural abilities to heal and survive mortal wounds, Eric Draven becomes the Crow and stalks the city in search of revenge. With such a tremendous, gothic premise ripe for storytelling, it's no surprise that where The Crow really shines is in its themes and aesthetics. Its exploration of life and death, the gift of a second chance at justice, and a love so strong and pure that even the afterlife is willing to wait to see the loss avenged. These themes are what make The Crow such a unique and enthralling story, and the entire film is dripping in this dark, desolate, gothic tone and aesthetic. Combining that look and feel and the gripping premise with some tremendous action sequences and the perfect atmospheric music, the movie just has this cool factor that many of the other things to come out of goth culture in the 90s lack. And while the movie has its shortcomings, there are moments of undeniable brilliance in The Crow that are worth revisiting even now, 30 years after the film's release. Before discussing the film itself though, one has to acknowledge the tragic, real-life story surrounding it. Brandon Lee's heartbreaking death, resulting from a horrible accident that took place on the set of The Crow, has built up as much mystique around the movie as anything within it. Lee was mortally wounded on set while filming what was the seminal event of the film, which depicted the rape and murder of his fiancée Shelley Webster and the killing of Lee's Eric Draven character too, at the hands of a group of brutal thugs. The firing of a faulty dummy round through the gun used on set prior to the filming of the deadly scene resulted in a squib load lying in wait in the weapon, primed to deliver untold tragedy. Though they switched to blanks for the murder scene, these still carried enough force to propel the lodged round out of the barrel and into the unsuspecting actor. Others on set initially believed Brandon was acting or playing a joke on them, but when they discovered what happened, he was rushed to the hospital. After emergency surgery couldn't save his life, he was pronounced dead at the age of 28. The son of Hollywood and martial arts legend Bruce Lee, Brandon's unfortunate death eerily mirrors the story of Eric Draven. While Draven and his fiancée were slain on screen the day before they could say their vows, Brandon himself was going to marry his fiancée a mere week after filming was set to wrap. Both the film characters and Brandon were cut down in their primes, just before they were set to begin a wonderful new chapter in their lives. Lee's death also mirrors his own father's untimely passing at just 32 years old. While Lee was killed during filming of the scene that kicks off the story of The Crow, much of the rest of the movie had already been filmed. Thanks to that, as well as some rewrites, clever editing, and what was cutting-edge technology for the time, we're all lucky that they were able to complete the movie. And if nothing more, with the actor's life cut short in such a horrific manner, The Crow is as much Brandon Lee's legacy as it is anything else. That whole topic could be a video all its own. But the purpose of this video is to pull out and take a critical look at a select few moments of absolute brilliance to be found in The Crow. A lot of the film is worth discussing, but these moments, for me, shine out above all the rest. The first scene I want to highlight actually happens last, chronologically, out of the scenes I'll be discussing here. And it really only comes down to a single line of dialogue spoken by Eric. The line comes during a conversation in a graveyard between Eric, who is now the Crow and nearing the end of his journey to avenge his and his fiancée's deaths, and Sarah, the kid Eric and Shelley had looked after when she was forced out onto the streets thanks to an absentee, drug-addicted mother. Here, Eric finds Sarah in the graveyard where Shelley is buried. Sarah didn't know where else to go, and at least at the graveyard she can be surrounded by those that she loved and loved her. When Eric looks after her, telling her that it's late and she should go home, Sarah laments that Eric never said goodbye.
You didn't say goodbye.
In this moment, Eric, as he is now, stands before Sarah. He could say goodbye now. He could apologize for not having a chance to say goodbye to Sarah. He could say any number of things to try and ease Sarah's suffering. But he doesn't.
You're just gonna have to forgive me for that.
Instead, he says that she will just have to forgive him. By this point, Eric realizes his own nature. He's here, but he's not really here. He's Eric, but he's not himself. He's not the Eric that could apologize and simply say goodbye to Sarah now. He realizes the truth of his existence in this plane and knows that any attempt to offer a farewell or an apology would just be empty platitudes. As Eric sees it, he can't say goodbye to Sarah because he's already gone, and he's been gone for a long time. Not only does this one line help subtly inform us of Eric's presence in this world and how he understands it, but it also speaks volumes about the regard he has for Sarah. He cares for Sarah and wouldn't deceive her in any way or say anything that he couldn't live up to. And what makes this scene even more poetic is that Shelley's dying request was for Eric to take care of Sarah. So now, risen from the dead and in the middle of his quest for revenge, Eric will still honor his fiance's last words and look after Sarah, signifying Eric's devotion to his slain bride-to-be, as well as showing us that, despite his appearance and his bloody pursuit of vengeance, Eric is still very much a hero and hasn't lost the caring nature that characterized him before his death. It's such a simple line and one that's easy to overlook, but in that one line, we learn a lot about Eric's true nature as the Crow. This next scene we're taking a look at largely stands out thanks to its aesthetic, and it's actually an amalgamation of two short scenes. Brought back from the dead, Eric revisits his rocker past, taking his guitar to the rooftops and serenading this despondent version of Detroit. Despite the totally edgy, goth nature and tone of the solo, that's not all we can take away from it. This scene represents Eric being able to briefly touch something of his past. Momentarily, he's able to relive something he loved, something that was taken from him just as much as Shelley or his own life were. Meanwhile, the Crow watches on and allows Eric this brief moment to experience and ultimately let go of his former life. But even more illuminating are the themes within the music itself. The solo starts as a slow, somber wail, echoing throughout the streets below, crying out in sadness about what transpired that fateful and fatal night on Eric's behalf. Then the pace quickens, and the tune transitions into a riff brimming with determination and symbolizing Eric's resolve to enact his revenge. Then the whole thing crescendos into this mad segment of pure rock. And ultimately, it all evolves into unbridled rage as Eric rips off this riff and smashes his guitar as only a true rocker can. Over the course of 80 seconds, Eric pours not only his passion, but all of his emotions into the solo. All of the sadness and pain and resolve and rage he's feeling come through crystal clear, as if the guitar itself could speak. Unfortunately, the guitar solo is bifurcated and split up within the movie. I understand why they did it. The way it's cut up places those musical themes I mentioned at different points in the film that match Eric's journey. But taken all together, I think splitting up this song robs us of what could have been an even more impactful scene. You can, however, find videos online where people put the whole thing together to get that experience. Regardless, this scene perfectly encapsulates not only all of the themes that people love about this movie, but also the unique aesthetic and tone that's made it so endearing and enduring. The last scene we're going to look at is my favorite. Once Eric has tracked down T-Bird, the ringleader of the thugs that killed Eric and Shelley, he forces him to drive to a secluded wharf, straps him down in his own beloved hot rod, and sends him off the dock to meet his fiery end. Cool, right? But there's much more to it than that. When we first see T-Bird here, he's in a state of sheer confusion.
What? Huh? What? What are you talking about?
He doesn't know who this guy is, why he's been tied down, and why he's asking about that happy couple from a year ago. While he frantically rambles off his account of that night, trying to make sense of the situation he's in, Eric rifles through the inventory of explosives in T-Bird's trunk. As Eric returns to the driver's side window, having found the right tool for the job, T-Bird's confusion gives way briefly to anger.
What? What do you want? What is it? What? Speak to me! Speak!
He's yelling at his unknown captor, demanding to know what he wants from him, demanding that Eric speak to him and offer some kind of understanding of what's happening to him. Eric's lips, however, stay sealed, and all he offers T-Bird is a glance at his face. But even underneath that painted masquerade, T-Bird recognizes Eric. Eric as he used to be, at least.
I know you. I know you. I knew you. I knew you.
Instantly, T-Bird's demeanor changes. He goes quiet for a moment as the realization sets in that he's dealing with something unexplainable, something supernatural, something that shouldn't be possible.
But you ain't you. You can't be you.
He almost seems to have a moment of solace, of relief, that he knows who Eric is and he can finally start to wrap his head around what's transpiring. But just as fast as that moment of contentment comes, it's replaced once again by confusion.
This is the really real world. There ain't no coming back. We killed your dad. There ain't no coming back.
He watched him die. This is the real world. People don't come back from what they did to him. They just can't. T-Bird's confusion fades even quicker this time, replaced with the realization that judgment has finally come knocking for him. That the Crow, this unexplainable being before him, has returned to exact revenge for the gangster's horrible deeds from the past. And the Crow is here to act as his Grim Reaper and ferry him off from this world. At this point, all of the other emotions dissipate, overtaken by abject terror. Devolving into fear, the only words T-Bird can find are,
There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back.
All the while, Eric doesn't utter a word. Despite T-Bird repeatedly pleading with Eric to speak to him, to help him make sense of this all, to help him confirm that any of this is really real, Eric remains silent. He's not here to help T-Bird understand or to explain his motives or his supernatural existence. He's only here for revenge, and his silence allows T-Bird to completely descend into madness all on his own. Now, with a full realization of what's happening, T-Bird displays something akin to acceptance. The only words left for the man are those of John Milton from Paradise Lost.
Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is.
Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. In Paradise Lost, this quote describes the moment that the devil felt overwhelming shame for his actions. Usually unrepentant, the devil beholds goodness and is struck with awe by goodness and virtue as he's forced to confront his own evil. And this sentiment perfectly mirrors T-Bird's own realization in this moment. The sins of his past have come back to haunt him, and he's awash with that same sense of shame that overwhelmed the devil. These are the last words that T-Bird utters before the Crow shuffles him off this mortal coil. Eric sends his hot rod flying off the end of the dock before it erupts into a fireball in midair. This explosion and the Crow igniting his emblem on the ground are just the chef's kiss to cap off this incredible scene. But beyond the cool factor and the badass nature of the Crow enacting revenge, this scene is just brilliant from start to finish. In just 86 seconds, this man went from sheer confusion to desperate anger to solace and understanding, back to confusion, to realization, to abject terror, and finally to the only form of acceptance a man like him is capable of. And the main character didn't have to utter a word. I have to tip my hat to David Patrick Kelly, who did an excellent job of not only taking T-Bird seamlessly through all these emotions, but also doing so in a realistic manner. He doesn't just display these over-dramatized forms of anger or fear, he offers a more grounded portrayal of how someone like him would act in this situation. And that helps us in the audience to really feel each and every emotional shift he goes through. It makes the entire scene gripping from start to finish, and after watching it, you just know you watched something special. Making this scene even more impressive is that it was filmed after Brandon's sad passing, which explains why Eric remains silent throughout it. It was a choice made out of necessity, but it ended up being a great artistic choice as well. This is my favorite scene in the movie, and I think it's the best example of these kind of moments of absolute brilliance the Crow has to offer. Now, when I say moments of brilliance, I really mean moments. The first scene between Eric and Sarah in the graveyard came down to a singular line, and the other two scenes played out in just barely over 3 minutes. But in that incredibly short time, the Crow was able to deliver some of its strongest storytelling and take the tragic tale of Eric Draven to another level. There are many incredible scenes and memorable quotes in The Crow worth talking about. Like the epic shootout between the Crow and Top Dollar's men, Eric quoting Edgar Allan Poe as he raps upon the door of the pawnshop owner who now has Shelley's engagement ring, Eric reliving the painful, hectic flashbacks when he first returns to their apartment, Or when Eric proclaims to Sergeant Albrecht that the men he's after died long ago. They died the moment they touched his fiancée. But these scenes that I chose to focus this video on shine through the rest of the film, and you can really feel in these moments that The Crow is touching on some special storytelling. While I love the original Crow and think it's great, I wouldn't say that it's perfect. Some criticize the movie, pointing to some cheap-looking sets and effects, its moments of cheesy dialogue or delivery, and some question the quality of acting in the film. And a few take issue with what they call a bare-bones plot, saying it's not overly exciting and it's too simple. But I think there's often beauty in simplicity. Others also think it's poorly edited, but that could just be their interpretation of the things the director had to do to come up with a finished product. And the most consistent complaint I see is that the movie wouldn't have been remembered how it is if Brandon Lee hadn't died while making it. I don't agree with much of the criticism, but I'd be remiss not to recognize some of the discourse around the movie, even if it's misguided. And anyway, in my view, The Crow is the kind of movie that has enough charm to forgive whatever shortcomings it may have and still be held in high regard. No, The Crow is not defined by its shortcomings, but rather by its many moments of brilliance that far outshine any of its weaknesses. Those moments of brilliance, together with the wonderfully gothic tone and aesthetic, and a fascinating premise ripe for storytelling, make The Crow a beloved classic that's been able to stand the test of time in many people's eyes. And thus, it's succeeded where many attempted sequels and reboots have failed. 30 years later, The Crow is still a fantastic film, and I hope that you can watch it and appreciate some of that brilliance as much as I do. What did you think about The Crow? What are some of your favorite moments of the film? Are you at least thankful that the 2024 version of The Crow reminded you that we already had a much better version of the story? Let us know in the comments. Also remember to leave a like on the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of current shows and movies, as well as the occasional retrospective review like this one. Thank you for rising from the dead with us, we'll catch you on the next one, and
Happy Halloween.